behavior, and that's tier one. How many of you have seen this triangle before? So you're familiar with it, like a couple of you. Let me explain it then. This is called multi-tiered system support because what is recommended from the research is that we work on preventing behavior. So tier one is that those things we do ahead of time to support the behavior we want. So at tier one, the goal is to see it's fatter in the bottom, that should address the majority of kids. And then tier two, those are things, extra things we do for the kids that don't seem to be responding to tier one. Then tier three, those are those kids that are head scratchers. Like why they don't respond to tier two is not clear. And then we do tier three. That's what my team does. We do something called functional behavior assessment. Have you heard of the word functional behaviors, that term, functional behavior assessment before? Raise your hand if you've heard that before. So that's an unfamiliar thing. Functional behavior, brand new thing. That's what I'm going to talk about today. It's a different way of looking at behavior than what you just heard from Erica and Tracy, but it fits right in. So I want you to be thinking, mindful when you put in your posters, if you learn from Tracy and Erica this morning. What an amazing presentation. I'm so glad I was here to hear all that. This part fits in with that really well. So try to make those connections if you can. If Tracy and Erica will make the connections, they can chime in too. On the back side of those papers we handed out to you, there's a T-chart. There'll be a space for you to make those connections and write notes down if you want to. Okay?
Okay.
So tier one is all about prevention. Here are some handy things we do at tier one. Tier one, we make expectations clear. If kids don't know what we want, they're probably not going to meet them. I have so many classrooms I've been in where I hear a lot of correction, and it's not really clear what the teacher wants. We hear what they don't want. They need to hear what we want. We need to recognize them when they're doing it. What we don't want is to be giving them more error correction than positive feedback. What can happen is we get so focused on the errors, we don't give them any attention for the things they're getting right. And how would that feel? Pretty crummy. So we don't want that to happen. That's what the 5-to-1 ratio is about. It's trying to swing it the other direction. Instead of 1 to 5, or sometimes 0 to 5, I've been in rooms where kids aren't getting any positive feedback. And I've been in public ed for a long time in a lot of classrooms. We don't want that. We want it to be 5 positive feedback to 1 error correction, if we can. So how do we do that? We have to make arrangements for that to happen because we don't want it to be artificial. We want it to be real. Then we want, some of the time, the reason they're making a lot of errors, the stuff we're asking to do is pretty hard. So we have to arrange it so it's not so hard for them. That's what that 4th one is. Here's the thing. It's not as easy as it looks. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it's not. Especially when you work with kids who have higher needs. I work in special education, so right away I'm going to know this is going to be harder for you. Most kids in special education are there for learning disabilities. That means reading, writing, and math are hard for them. So how do I make it easier for them is what I'm doing at tier one. I'm doing prevention, error prevention at tier one. How do I do that? I make expectations clear. I may have to teach them to them. I need to know what their preferences are and include that in the day. It can't all be about things that are hard. So I need to know what they like. I also need to be familiar with what's hard for them because those are the times I really need to plan for. I need to know what's reinforcing for them. I've seen people say, we're going to earn this at the end of this activity, but it's not something the kids really want, so it's not really a reward. So taking the time to figure out what they like is important if we're trying to reinforce their behavior with some kind of reward, like an activity. So how does this relate to that first thing I talked about, that functional behavior assessment, that new thing? Behavior functions. I'm going to give you an example. Here's an example of a child in preschool. This is how it begins. These behavior problems begin when they're really little. And they can be big problems for everybody, or they can be little problems that only affect them. But a big problem for them is affecting them. So The student is playing, and it's time to clean up, and the student doesn't clean up. So the teacher approaches and helps the student clean up. How could that reinforce not following directions? How is it a problem the teacher came over there and helped them? Well, it could be the student wasn't getting any adult attention, and now the student has it. Contingent with not following a direction. Contingent means the behavior came in contact with reinforcement. The teacher attention didn't happen before that, it happened because of not following directions. Or it could be the student doesn't like cleaning up, so now they don't really have to. The adult's gonna do most of that for them. So that's how it's reinforced. I don't follow directions when I'm a small child because I'll get an adult to do it for me. I see this happening in preschool, I see this happening in elementary and middle school, and I taught high school, and I definitely saw it there with my high school students. So I had kids come up to me and say, I can't find my paper, Miss Giddings. I'm like, did you look in your notebook? Did you look in your backpack? Did you look in your locker? No, I want you to look first. I want you to help me. I want you to do that for me. I have to make them look through their belongings, and 9 out of 10 times they had it, but they were trying to escape the task of going through all their papers to find something. Then they wanted to tell me that I lost it. So I had to help them learn to do the work and not get out of it. A lot of my job is that in high school. Then the other thing this little child could be getting is getting the toys longer. I'm not going to follow the direction until you come over here because that is added time I get with toys. So those are 3 ways that behavior can function. So this chart explains that in 2 categories. Behavior can function to gain access to something, or it can function to avoid something or escape something. So those are the things, some examples there. It could be more attention, or it could be more time with something. So with my example, I said it could have functioned for getting adult attention. I see little kids getting all kinds of more attention because they're not doing what we're asking them to do. It can just function with getting out and doing something. I'm not going to do it until you help me. Now you guys know that we work with kids. You see a lot of that. Some people call that learned helplessness. They learn, I'm not going to really work on this until I have you helping me, and that is a big problem because there's not enough of us to help all of them. So we have to work on that with that. Or it can function to gain access to something they like a little bit longer. So I subbed during that COVID. I subbed a lot. And I'd be in classrooms where kids have had their headphones on, and you tell them you gotta take you gotta take the music out. And always some of them waiting until you got over them, told them then, like, hey, I see you still have your headphones, when they finally took them out. That function, getting access to that reinforcer longer. So this doesn't apply just to preschoolers. And by the way, up there it says, a pointer, it says problem behavior. This isn't true. It's reinforcement for all behavior. But we only concern ourselves for all behaviors, we concern ourselves with the behaviors we want. So, in that little kid example, the little preschooler, I think we could do tier 1 with this without going as far as just examining this kid with functional behavior assessment, taking all the time to just isolate the problem with a big, long process. We can assume that we need to teach kids how to ask for things, ask for attention, for example. Or we can teach them to ask for help. This is the number one thing I want to see with middle school and high school kids. They're not taught to ask. We don't normalize it. We make it seem like it's a problem for them to need help. I want this to be something as a high school teacher that is okay for them to do when we like it. Ask for help from adults, ask for help from other students. That should be normal and that should be okay. And it would function. It would help them when things are hard. The last one is, we can design, if you're working with kids, if you're pulling them out to work with them or you're working with them in the classroom, we could try, if we know their preferences, or we know that what things are easier or harder, we can arrange the order we do things by starting with something that's more preferred and then interspersing the things that are harder in between things that are less hard or more enjoyable. That's that pre-map on the bottom. So attention maintained behaviors. Well, kids who get most of their attention from errors can find that just fine. That's the way I get your attention. So I'm just gonna keep being a behavior problem for you, because that's what gets you over here to me. So we wanna make sure we're not giving them attention only for errors, or giving them more attention for things they get right. Escape, maintain, behavior, we've already talked about this. Tracy gave a great example of teaching a kid with a timer. I actually put that in a behavior plan sometimes. I know you don't want to work unless I'm with you, so I'm going to start reinforcing you for making an effort on your own. So I'll put a timer with you for a minute or two, then you know I'm coming back. And whatever you got done, I'm going to be systematic about it. If you got one word on the paper, if you put your pencil on the paper and looked at it for a long time, by yourself without me beside you, I might begin giving you some praise for that. And then there's access, maintain behavior, getting access to something longer. Like I told you, the kids with their phones and their earbuds, it would take them out till I arrived right beside them, and then I took them out, and then they put it back in, had to go back. So it could have been access to a longer time, their preferred thing, or it could be they just thought it was funny getting me to ping pong around the classroom. Anyway, here are the most likely things that are occurring with behavior. Access. So you see this bucket here? The behavior can function for access to novelty, to peer attention, food treats, teacher attention, preferred activities. On the flip side, it can function for relief from those things. Now, when you're working with kids, this one is fearful. When it's brand new, they don't know if they can do it. So they may have behavior around new learning that they're going to try to escape or avoid. That's a hard thing to do. I took one of my first classes in all of this behavior stuff. The person taught us about her theory of learning. Her theory of learning was there's 4 stages. The first stage is acquisition, that's new learning, it's brand new to you. Now think about something you learned recently that was brand new to you. It doesn't have to be an educational thing. It could have been like learning to sew or knit or something like that. How many of you have worked on like learning a whole new thing recently? Good. All of us should do that. Because when you do learn something new, you remember what it feels like to be a learner. And it's a scary thing. I took a ceramics class, and I kept at it for 2 years. I had a new learner, I was in the beginning, and I knew that most of the people in my class, I mean, every new beginning class I took, most of them would drop out. It's not because they weren't good, it's because it was so stressful learning something new and being new at it for so long, because some things take a really long time to master. And that stage 1, acquisition, is the hard one. Stage 2 is fluency. Getting so good at it, you don't have to think about it anymore. How many of you drive your car to work? All right. You go the same way every day. Have you ever been driving somewhere else that takes the same path and started heading for work? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's fluency. We don't have to think about it anymore. So when I said adding that pre-mac, it doesn't have to be a super fun game or anything, but putting something there that you have fluency with is something you won't mind doing. So embedding a fluency task in between acquisition tasks can make life easier and more comfortable. Now in pottery, that wasn't an option. Everything was new. There's no way my instructor could have done that. That's why we had that dropout rate. Then there is, I was on stages of learning, then there's maintenance. If you don't do something for a while, your ability to do it will drop. So we make kids practice things so they maintain that skill. Now back when I was in high school, we had to learn how to use the keyboard and type to fluency. And you get to be like 80 words per minute, like maybe a record, 80 words per minute would be so awesome. But if I got that good at it, to maintain it, I had to keep doing it. And if you play an instrument, like the guitar or the piano, yeah, You know that you have to get good at that. You had to just do a lot of practice.
Practice and
What I'm
practice.
learning also new. It is actually very challenging too.
And it can be boring and tedious at times because you have to practice those same notes over and over again, right? So you get it just right.
If you dedicate, if they say at least 10 minutes a day doing when you're doing learning, the new activity that you're learning, it actually helps you get there. Just 10 minutes a day.
10 minutes a day. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it really can be, right? Because that's a grueling 10 minutes. And then that's the thing. Have you guys ever been in a class where you get homework that you really can't stand? Okay, you're an acquisition. You gotta sit down with that textbook, you gotta write a paper, you gotta listen to some lecture again. And suddenly you gotta clean the house. What would that be? Escape maintain behavior. Whenever I have something I dread doing, suddenly I'm really in the mood for cleaning house. Because I'm doing something that feels okay, but it's not the thing I really need to be doing. So I'm telling you, we all engage in these behaviors. The last stage of learning is generalization. And this is a hard one. We teach kids in a particular environment, and they'll recognize what they're supposed to be doing in that environment. And then they have to learn how to recognize how to do that in other environments, with other people. And it looks a little bit different. But all those stages of learning help me understand why learning would be hard for kids, as well as for me. Okay, so I gave you an example of what I do to get out of things I don't want to do. I clean my house. Think about yourself. I want you to think about, is this a new way of thinking about behavior? And can you think about how some of the ways your behavior may function? So I gave some examples, like nagging a family member to complete a chore. So what I'm doing is, I'm not gonna stop standing near you asking you to do it until you do it. You get tired of me standing here asking you to do it, so you do it. I think that would function. Your compliance would function on me leaving. That's how you escape me, is doing what I ask you to do. That's why nagging works. I did it all the time in high school. I was unapologetic to it, to the kids, because I know it works. I'm gonna keep asking you and asking you and asking you until you do it. You're doing it, now I'm gonna walk away. I asked in a nice way, but I really wanted them to do it. It's good for them. Or not answering a phone when someone's calling. What's that? Avoidance. I don't want to talk with that person, I'm just not going to answer the phone. What about cleaning every nook and cranny? I already talked about that one. So take a moment at your table and talk about that.
Yeah.
Think about some escape maintain behaviors or relief. They're relief behaviors. My best relief behavior is my snooze button on my phone for my alarm. I get that 8 minutes of relief. So think about that. Talk about that with your
Another 8 minutes, another 8 minutes, another 8 minutes.
have behavior problems, or any behavior actually, the behavior problems we have with kids. Those kids engaging in things that they're a problem because it's interfering with their learning. I don't have a problem with the word problem, because that's how I think about it. If you're doing this and it's not good for you, it's a problem for you. I'm here for you. When I'm their teacher, I'm there for those kids. I want them to learn. If they're doing things that are interfering with their learning, that's a problem for them. I have a lot of heart about that. I want things to be better for them. I want them to gain a lot from being at school. If there are things that are interfering with that, I'm going to do something about it. So one thing I'm going to engage in Tier 1. I'm going to be thinking about how Tier 1 can address function of behavior. It can address access. It can address relief, like my snooze button on my alarm. So we can make it clear when things they want are going to happen. We can make it clear what has to happen first before they can have them. We can teach them how to ask for those things. They don't have the words sometimes, even in high school, how to ask. I know that's the thing, I taught kids with disabilities, but I was constantly working with kids who didn't have it. I'm like, let me tell you how to ask me that. Then you ask me that, okay, now I hear you. And I can say yes or no. Arrange access with a reward for completion of some kind. Now, I'm not talking about having to go to the dollar store. We want to do those preference assessments because we want to know how to reinforce them without spending money. Sometimes a lot of sometimes activities we do with them, conversations they want to have with us, that can serve as a reward. And then relief. We can arrange relief by making it clear how much is expected before they get done. Then they can see the ending. That helped me so much with kids when I tutored them one-to-one, when they just how much we had to get through, then we were going to be done. And I knew they were craving. I tutored kids in middle school and high school. They wanted my attention. They just wanted to, I want to tell you about my baseball game coming up. I want to tell you about my soccer game. I want to tell you about the things they're doing. They want me to hear it and be proud of them. So like, when we get done, we'll have that 5-minute conversation about all the things you want to talk about. I want to hear about it. And then beginning and ending with preferences, teaching how to ask for help. I already said I want that to be a normal thing. We teach all kids in middle school and high school and elementary. And we want to arrange for relief. So I'm going to talk about what that could look like. Strategies that make this possible. So the first example is the visual schedule that Tracy and Erica showed you. Now they don't have to look like this. It can be handwritten. If you're pulling kids for a small group, you can just handwrite it, the schedule. I know you have kids that don't read, but maybe you could just, draw a little picture beside it. So they represent what that is. There's an example right here. This is the first bend. This could show what we have to do before we get the activity we want. So I had kids, elementary kids, I had a small group for Al or Steve when I subbed. They give me a lesson plan. I would get a little whiteboard and I'd write out what we're gonna do. And I'd say what we're gonna do. I put the numbers 1, 2, 3. And they couldn't read it, but they knew 1, 2, 3. So we're doing 1, we got 1 done, I cross it off. Now we're doing 2, we got 2 done, cross it off. Now we're doing 3, got 3 done. And now we get to play that game. And because I was new to the kids, I didn't know what they liked. I started with some kind of like game, and they liked it. I said, "Do you want to do that?" And usually they did. So I started with some little like 1-minute fun game. Like, hey, you guys, if we finish all these things, then we're gonna get that game at the end. And I had pretty cooperative groups, even though I didn't know the kids. So I used the strategy, teaching them how to ask. Now, if you think about kids when they're at home, it's like how I imagine kids, not how they are with me at school. So at school, I think they clam up and they're not really themselves. So I imagine they're probably doing the annoying things my kid did. She would ask me, how long do we have to do this? What are we gonna do when we're done? Like, they using the tone. That's good. Those are kids that are gonna get access. Now, I know she was different at school and did that in a better way. So I think about how we're gonna teach them a better way of asking for access. So it might be at the beginning of saying, what do you want to do when we finish? And then teaching them how to ask for those things. So we have a menu of choices, and they can actually say, I want to play Uno, or I want to talk about Pokemon. Because Tracy and Erica love Pokemon. And then you're going to love it when you're doing it with them, even if you don't. You could, if you have to. If the schedule itself can't be the reinforcer, like the last thing you do is going to be the fun thing, you could use some sort of star chart. It doesn't have to be individual kids. Like this one example, this has individual kids. So if you had a small group, every kid would have a small star chart. You could have just one star chart for the whole group. So if you're doing a small group, it could be that this is how you're setting it up. When the whole group, everyone in the group has learned all their stars, then we're all going to get the reward. Or it could be that when a person gets his stars or her stars or their stars, then we're going to get the reward. So you could go that far. There's one called the hero procedure, where one person in the group, the target kid who has the most difficulty, when he gets or she gets or they get all their stars, and the whole group will get their reward. If I were going to do that, I would want to always have it be that kid. I would choose, today you're our hero. When you get all your stars, we'll get the reward. But that can do those, teach kids to help each other. So help your hero for our group get their stars. That's why I talked about teaching kids how to help each other. That's a way to teach them how to help each other. So I want to take a minute for reflection. You can write in your notes, or you can just talk amongst yourself for a couple minutes. Think about how ways it would work for you and then where you are, where you could arrange for access. So how do you think you could use one of these strategies? What would you need to do to use it? Like, what do you have to bring with you? Or what do you have to ask other people to do to help you? And what do you imagine yourself saying to the students when you're doing it? Okay? So let's give you about 5 minutes at your table to think about that.
Y con poquito que le empiezas a hacer, cambian su behavior, se acostumbran. O sea, es una rutina solo para empezar, para que ellos cambien. Les ayuda mucho.
Es igual, yo he visto que con Nicole o con los que hacen el check-in y check-out, les damos un premio ya cuando acaban el día. Si llegan a un cierto punto de que tienen que llegar a 24 puntos. Ya si llegan a 24 puntos, les dan un premio, unos
Yeah,
taquis.
and they're getting attention,
Yeah,
getting reinforcement.
positive reinforcement.
También algunos que prefieren premios más grandes.
Ajá, eso se pone bien duro.
Al final de la semana.
What do you think I am?
Or something like, if you call home, you call my mom,
Que le mande mensaje a su mamá que
Positivo.
sube el trabajo.
Yeah, a lot of our families have to work so much.
Yeah, they don't have time.
true.
You know, dos trabajos, you know, they're barely functioning except I have a mom and a dad that I barely got in. Their kids were not going to school. No vienen. ¿Qué pasó? El papá trabaja de noche. He comes home, he goes to sleep. He don't wake up to send the kids to school. You know? I said, busquen una tía, busquen a alguien que les ayude.
La prioridad es el niño. Es el hijo.
Así es.
And so they're close to getting sent to court, you know, for not sending their kids. So, ¿qué hacen? Mejor se cambian de casa y se van a otra escuela.
Sigue el mismo.
To give themselves some time, you know, to start new.
Yeah.
That's what they learn how to do.
Los enfadamos mucho y se enfadan that we care. And then they're like,
Luego en otra escuela no sabes cómo
oh yeah. Yep. Yo tengo una familia que they're getting bullied a little bit. The kids are getting bullied a little bit, not too much. It was a consistent issue.
Casi nada.
And then they moved them to another school. Then now at that school, like, whoa, it's worse. Can I come back? Nah, I'm sorry, you can't come back.
Yeah.
Ariano, habla Ariano family.
Ay,
No, no,
a mi niño le están haciendo bullying. Le dije yo, ¿y su niño qué es lo que está haciendo? A ver, no, yo le digo, ¿quién les está haciendo bullying? Vengan. Yo, ¡pum!, rápido. Resolvemos el problema. Okay, so I make them come in, I talk to them, talk to those kids who are causing problems. I like to
Solve the problem.
get it in the bud,
Yeah.
you know.
Right away.
Many parents feel like, I don't know. I think the parents also feel like the school is here to teach them, to be a parent too. But the parent also has to do some sort of teaching outside of the school as well. They have to have a little bit of responsibility. And that's something that's always kind of
I
lacking.
had a parent do that with the chicken check-out with the students.
Did you all engage in some
And
really
the
fun
students struggle a
conversations?
lot and at school, and he was like,
Does anyone have any?
limpia, aquí no lavan los trastes,
Wait for a
aquí no
second.
nada. And I was like,
We'll go on to the topic.
I can't,
Yeah.
That's-
Usted que puede, hace.
you know? I was like,
I
I
sometimes
can give him ideas, especially.
so I have charts and I tell them, úselo en la casa.
Does anyone have a really great idea they want to share with everyone else?
Cuando lo haga, cuando llegue a
You don't want the microphone?
un premio,
I told him that.
ajá, compren papitas.
No brave soul out there? Okay, we can move on. Do you want, you have one?
I just wanted to
Es un consejo.
thank you for the reminder of how important visual schedules are. I don't use them in intervention groups,
Okay, in the morning.
and I forgot about
had a
that, Lori.
kid.
So thank you, because I will start using them with some of my groups that I have identified have more of a difficulty in getting through
Wrestling.
and asking,
Ayer.
what time is it? Is it almost over? Da-da-da-da, you know?
Sí, no podemos
When are we
equilibrar.
going to recess? Are we this? Are we that?
Doctor,
And especially when those have,
este hueso es muy débil.
you know, their time perception is not there yet. So. Right, so visual schedules, thank you.
Yes, very important.
So we have a visual schedule, something in the visual schedule. Anything else people are planning on doing differently or adding to if they're not doing it already?
No sé cómo se-
What has worked for me is expressing clear expectations of what we want to accomplish. So before we start a task, I tell them what the expectations, what I want them to get out of whatever activity we're doing, and making sure that they understand. The way that they get there, I encourage finishing. I don't care how we get there. These are the expectations. I want to see how you make it happen. And a lot of the times they, oh, I want to wait to see how, I want to see how you get there. And any way you get there, as long as you meet the expectations, is the right way.
That's right. I call that reinforcing response effort. We don't want to only reinforce the correct answer. We don't want kids to think there's after a correct answer. We want them to know, we want you to be thinking about it and try to do this on your own. So I love that. Any more thoughts about how you're going to use the 5-to-1 ratio? How you can increase that? How can you increase that you're paying more attention to the things you're getting right, so you're not always error correcting them? I think we have to be really deliberate about that one because we might work with kids who make more mistakes. Now you guys might work with kids, I know that do a greeting activity. If I did a greeting activity, that could be a social skill of teaching them the scripts of talking to each other and listening to each other. When I taught a special ed class, I had a very similar schedule where I was working on social skills. It was a nice way for them to start every day. They always knew the first thing we were doing in this Giddings classroom was something they liked. It wasn't heavy-handed, but I was actually teaching them something. They needed to learn to listen to each other and how to respond to each other. So I like that schedule. And then the next thing is the heavy hitter, the teaching is the acquisition skill. Then we're going to something light and fun, like a fluency game. So that would be a really nice schedule. I might give kids the scripts I want them to use, because I want them to learn how to talk to me and to each other. And in the beginning, I'm going to have those scripts, like sentence starters, right on the table so they can read them. I'm going to point to them to remind them to do that. Then I'm going to fade those out. In the beginning, you can use that as a reminder, but eventually I don't want you to have to rely on that visual cue. I want you to remember to do that. So, I just said all that. Another example of relief would be teaching him how to ask for reduction. Reducing response effort can look like, can I do less of this? I taught kids in special education to use their accommodations on their IEP, which was reduced task demands. That was on most of the kids' IEPs. Well, no teacher was going to do that unless a kid in high school went and asked them for it. So I made them learn to ask for it. I taught them how to ask that accommodation. It was good for them because some of them were going to go on to community college or post-secondary educational settings some kind, where they would need to continue to advocate for themselves. So they needed, at the high school, is a perfect opportunity for them to practice talking to adults. So I taught them, what does that look like? What do you say? So you plan the scripts you're teaching for them. Can I do less? Can you help me? Can I do this instead? When you're at home and you have a list of chores, you write them out? Do you always do them in that order? Sometimes you kind of do them in what you're in the mood for. So sometimes kids just aren't prepared for something we're asking them to do. So a lot of times on IEPs, I recommend for kids who engage in a lot of behavior that gets them out of doing things, let them ask to do something different sometimes. And then we might let that work a lot of the time in the beginning, but then we're going to start fading it out. We're not always going to let that work. It will work some of the time, not all the time. But that, in the beginning, can really address behavior problems. But it'd be nice in a group sometimes offering a choice. Like, we have all these things to do, guys. Which of these things do you want to do? Or we get 2 teacher choice and 2 student choice. That can make it a more doable session because they feel some control of what's going to happen. That can provide relief. Or you could use some kind of visual schedule. Now, this is a token board that, is a beautiful image from Google. Someone worked really hard on that. I never worked that hard on my token boards because they don't have to be pretty or fancy. They can just be written out, drawn out on a piece of paper. Even floppily, they still work. I'm not a handwriter, so mine are always a mess. And they still work. But what I would do for this wasn't about earning access. This is about earning relief. So I always arranged with my kids who were reluctant to do some things like writing. Really, writing was the number one thing. Some of it was math, especially math fluency. I would tell them, I want you to do 10 things in math or 10 things in writing. I really only wanted 5. But I didn't tell them that. I told them, if you get every one you get right, so at the beginning, oops, wrong. I'm right here. So right here, when you get that one right, I take it off. And I also will take that one off. That if you don't do this to my criteria, that one stays off. So I was encouraging them to make a better effort. Because I had a lot of kids who would just put any answer down just to get it out of the way. And they weren't making the effort to really do it. So they were earning relief by getting the answers correct. So if they got theoretically, if they got all these right, they didn't have to do these. So that was the reward, just taking away. I have some kids on token economy, so they're earning tokens with I use their planner as a token economy in high school. If they had a good check mark from all their teachers, they got a homework pass for me, because they had me for a class. So if you got all positive checks on your planner today, I'm going to take the homework assignment off for me. So I was using escape as a reward. You do a good job, I'll ask you to do one less thing. So now I want you to do the same thing. In 5 minutes, think about how you could provide relief in your setting. So you can talk to each other, write some notes, write some things out. But how do you think you could arrange for relief? What do you need to do it? What do you hear yourself saying to your student when you're doing it? And then write out a couple sentences or scripts that you're saying it. Okay?
Okay.